Coach Corey from LiberatedPerformer, and welcome to the video on 10 memory tips that you better remember. So the first strategy is chunking. And chunking is where you take a section and you memorize it, then you take another section and you memorize it, then you memorize those sections together. Now, this is the most popular way of memorizing, and you're probably already memorizing like this. However, if you're running into any memory challenges, break the sections down into phrases. So memorize phrase, phrase, combine phrases. Or if that's too much, even go half phrase or note by note. The second memory tip is to memorize conceptually. For example, what is the form of your performance? Does it go section A, then section B, and then back to section A? Or conceptually, what are you trying to go for artistically? What are you trying to describe to the audience? For example, I have a Mozart concerto. It's a very youthful movement, very sprightly and energetic, and very classically oriented in terms of style. The next way to memorize is to memorize physically. Now, you can break these down into two types of physical memory. For example, technique. What does it feel like to, for example, I'm a violinist, so what does it feel like to shift? Oh, that shift, first to seventh position. Okay, got to get my arm around. Boom, boom. And then we get it automatic, and it's our kinesthetic memory and way of learning. The other physical way of learning is to physically memorize what it feels like to actually perform. For example, our artistic intention and character. You get the idea. But basically, we're memorizing and we're getting lost in the performance mode of just feeling the characters and transitioning between characters. And honestly, I have no idea that I was on camera and that I was just kind of exuding that artistic intention. Another tip is to test your memory. Now, you can test your chunking strategy. For example, is this section right? Yes, it's right according to my recording or my music. Okay, great, I can go on. And you can also test it conceptually and physically as well. But with testing it, you want to aim for a high success percentage, just like practicing anything else. You want to not get it 1 out of 10 times, but 9 out of 10 times, or even higher if you do more repetitions. Another way of testing is to not necessarily always go from beginning to the end. For example, you can start at different sections and then go to the end, or different phrases and then go to the end, or on a super micro level, go from different notes to the end. And that might seem obsessive, but it's actually a really foolproof strategy, because if you make a memory mistake anywhere in the performance, you know that you have the experience and the automatic reaction to go from that note to the end. So your performance will be completed successfully. Another way of testing is to add pressure to the performance, because we all know that once the pressure comes, we get to have lots of doubt about trusting our memory. Okay, so we have to pressure test it to make sure we have positive experiences before we actually hit the stage. The next tip is to memorize correctly from the beginning. Now, I'm very guilty of this. Maybe I'm memorizing a concerto or a quartet part, and I realize a month in that I have a couple wrong notes. Now I have to relearn it and waste my time, not spend my time on other things, but relearn that memory mistake so I can get it right. So, avoid my mistake and memorize it correctly from the beginning by testing it early on. The next tip is to trust your memory. Now, we spent all this time talking about ways to improve your success percentage, but at the same time, at the end, you just have to trust your memory. And if memory is something that is challenging to you, be patient. You may have a lot of negative experiences that are reinforcing this identity and this lack of confidence when it comes to memory, but be patient, because when you practice memorizing, or when you invest a lot of time in the skill of memory, guess what? It will pay off. It will get easier and you will be just fine. Similar to trusting your memory, you want to be okay with making mistakes on stage. For example, we spend all this time again increasing our chance of successfully completing our performance by memory, but if the mistake happens, don't worry, we have built-in contingency plans. For example, our experience in the practice room going from each note to the end. So you will get back on right away. Also, you have to fundamentally be okay with making mistakes. It's okay, it's not the end of the world, and it's the beauty of live performance. Mistakes are always an inherent risk, so just embrace that aspect of performing. The next tip is to make sure you can actually memorize it. Now, sometimes we are forced to memorize, and sometimes we have the option of memorizing, and that brings in the idea of the time-cost ratio. For example, if you have a performance tomorrow, there's probably no way you're going to remember the whole performance. Also, if you only have a performance once in like every 20 years, or what they call a one-off, is probably not worth your time and effort to memorize that performance. Meanwhile, if there's repertoire that's going to be cycled and it's going to actually help you liberate your performance in the sense that you don't have to be glued to the paper, or where you could just let the performance flow out of you, in that case, then you do want to commit it to long-term memory. And the question is, of course, how do we commit it to long-term memory? Well, there's a couple aspects. The first one is to memorize it over time. For example, you can't cram and expect to have it in your memory for the rest of your life. You have to learn it over time. Second one is you have to memorize consistently. So not only is it over time, but you're not going to take these year gaps in between. Try to keep it consistent. Maybe every week, just add it to your practice session, just to focus on memory for that certain performance. Also, you want to memorize it in different places. For example, if I just met you in a mall, you might not remember me in a week. But if I met you in a mall, and then we went to a cafe, and then we went to a concert, and then you saw me online, and yada, 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 well, you're going to remember my face better. And that's the same thing with memorizing our repertoire. So try to perform your repertoire for memory in different places. Now, the last way to commit to long-term memory and to reinforce the success of committing it to long-term memory is to sleep. Now, I know when I hear advice from outside of the performance world, like, you should sleep, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not going to help that much, especially if I get this brand new technique. But actually, sleep is fundamental for putting your memory and consolidating and making it robust. So whenever you have a memory practice target goal for that day, make sure you have enough time to sleep or it's useless. The last memory tip is to see the long-term benefits of memorizing. Now, when I was memorizing Brahms Concerto, which is 45 minutes, it was a daunting and huge task, and I was discouraged quite a bit, actually. But keeping the vision and, kind of like the promised land of like, okay, well, if I do memorize this concerto, think about how liberated I will be when I'm performing it. For example, I won't be thinking about what note comes next or what section comes next. I'll just be totally absorbed in the music because the piece itself will be in my nervous system. I'll have tons of experience on it, and I can just perform. And that's ultimately what the memory does for you. Also, one of the inherent beauties of the performing arts is that you are not memorizing a checklist of items to get at a grocery list. No, you are physically memory, kinesthetic memory, also the skill set of performing your instrument or whatever art form you do, it sticks with you even as your brain ages. And that is really beautiful, knowing that you can walk around, have for me, it's like the Bach sonatas and partitas, the Paganini's, the major concertos, all in here, all in this beautiful brain that you have, that you need to invest in, that you need to love, that you need to nurture and embrace the power of. Because that is the ultimate motivator, especially when things get a little bit discouraged, when you have such a large memory task ahead of you. But knowing that memory is such a powerful and strong tool towards your performance and also lifelong happiness is an amazing thing to keep in mind. Anyway, that's my rant for today, but hope you remember some of this and hope it helps your memory. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please comment below. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates and visit LiberatedPerformer.com if you want to learn more about how to be a great performer.